Warning: Greece may have to claim bankruptcy at the end of June 2015 as the EU rapidly falls apart. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into the severity of this situation in Greece and how that affects the EU and, of course, Europe and all around the world. Let's begin with this article here as we talk about the government of Greece confirming that it would run out of money by the end of the month unless its creditors agreed to release 7.2 billion euro in bailout funds. They say, give me $7 billion or we are going to have chaos. Downing Street also disclosed that ministers were stepping up plans for a, quote, Grexit. They are worried about the Greek exit. Many countries, of course, worried about this. The mainstream media is even talking about this as well. There is much that they owe here and they can't afford it. And they're basically saying, look, let us write it off or we are going to have some big problems. Let's move on to this right here. It's probably very hard for you to read the fine print, but I'll read the title that says Greek banks on the brink of collapse as savers panic. This is out of the Times, and I'll just try and touch on a couple points here. I know the font is small, so I'll move on quickly. Greek banks are facing collapse, and the country is, quote, dangerously close to exiting the euro, according to these officials here. Greek defaulting on its debt ended in failure last night. They tried to talk about it, and basically what they said was, look, we're not getting anywhere and we have to start preparing for the worst. There's much more in this here. I'll put the link in the description. What you need to understand is that there are so many different reasons why they could fail. Ultimately, they're asking for a pardon, essentially, a bailout on the money that they received a bailout on. They have so much debt. They want more and more bailouts. That's the way a bailout works. That's the intention of a bailout, is basically to get them continuously requesting more money. The terms get worse and worse. They have to sell off their assets. I'm going to move on from this here as we look at ECB not sure if the Greek banks would open on Monday, according to officials. This is the most serious news of the day as we look at this article out of Reuters. The ECB told a meeting of the eurozone finance ministers on Thursday that it was not sure if the Greek banks, which have been suffering large daily deposit outflows, that they would be able to open on Monday. What we have here is a very, very critical scenario that is occurring. We're looking at a bank holiday, perhaps. We're looking at capital controls. Every time I warn about this, there is always a dead silence within the media and with many individuals who are really thinking that the market will rise indefinitely. This is an extremely spooky scenario that could happen in a very near amount of time here. Basically, what this individual from the ECB said is, tomorrow they'll be open. Monday, I don't know. So this is very critical. As I said before, very, very important to note. I'm going to move on. Just note that this is the key article for the day. As we look at Greece and the situation here, the talks between the Greece, its eurozone, and the IMF creditors over cash for reforms. And what this is basically, they're saying, look, we'll make some changes, but we are going to need some money. And the protests have already begun because they said, reminding them, I should say, that they don't want to make not one step backwards. So the people are ready to hit the streets. They don't care about who the government is. They simply want their pardon from the IMF. Failure to reach an agreement would mark the beginning of a painful course that would lead initially to a Greek default and ultimately the country's exit from the euro area and most likely from the European Union. That's not a quote from the Money GPS. That is actually the Bank of Greece saying that. This is very serious. We're getting very close to those days. The days are numbered. Ultimately, very big issue that's going on here. In my book, I talked about 1920, what I call the ghost crash, because nobody seems to know about it, that it's not 1929, we're looking at 1920. And I'm quoting Warren G. Harding when he said, gross expansion of the currency and credit have depreciated the dollar just as expansion and inflation have discredited the coins of the world. We inflated in haste, we must deflate in deliberation. We debase the dollar in reckless finance, we must restore in honesty. There is no country right now that is trying to restore in honesty. They have destroyed all of the dollars of the world. We can see this occurring right now in Europe in particular. Look at how bad the situation is there right now. And what is their solution? Ultimately, it is to cause this different levels of austerity. The people are not having it at all. Let's move on to this article out of the AP. And all I wanted to note here is that essentially Russia could be lending a hand to Greece, something I've been talking about for quite some time. And there's basically just speculation that the Greeks could be seeking a Russian loan. Will Russia bail out Greece? Will they be in part of these bailouts? I'm not really sure. But we see the Prime Minister of Greece heading over there again for some talks. What happens there, we will have to keep our eyes on. This here is something else where we look at the EU essentially falling apart. The EU in general doesn't like the situation of Greece. They're all interconnected. They're all forced on this. This is why the situation isn't very good for other countries, especially the stronger countries, when they have to be there to bail out the weaker ones. If Britain can't secure the changes we need, then it's vital the case to leave an unreformed EU is made loudly and clearly. What we have here is many people in Britain saying, why do we need to be any part of this EU structure when we can just get out and deal with this on our own? They don't need the EU. In fact, no country needs the EU. You can have any form of agreement you want, despite that these agreements oftentimes have many Trojan horses within them. You can have agreements and treaties and everything else. You don't need a European Union. This isn't necessarily something that's required. If any country wants to leave, they should be able to leave at any given time. Speaking of which, we're talking about the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Thursday that Berlin was still aiming to reach a political framework for a comprehensive trade deal between the EU and the United States by the end of this year. So all the while we have all this chaos going on, so much bad essentially in the news. And what are they doing? They're trying to sign more agreements and forming these political unions, strengthening the ties here. They say that they help with, economically. That's not the case. It never does. Look at NAFTA, look at GATT. Admittedly, the US government is admitting the fact that NAFTA did take away jobs. This is never the case. They don't do this for that reason. They do this for obviously the deeper reasons here. This is the kind of article that I hate to read. It is technically unrelated to what I've been talking about today, but stay with me for a moment. Law enforcement seizes $11,000 from a 24-year-old at the airport without charging him with a crime. This is going on, in fact, all across the U.S., where we see money being seized from people with no crime whatsoever. And this reminds me of what's happening every single day, where they use these bailouts, the bail-ins, the taxes, the levies, all of these different forms of devaluation of the people's currency, whether it's stolen right from the people's pocket, as it was in this case, whether it's through inflation or any of the other schemes that they've set up for us. essentially what I'm trying to note is they have full control over the political sector, the economic sector, the education, the healthcare, and everything else. They have control over every facet of our lives, and we are simply here to basically watch it all go down. But you have a chance to make a few adjustments to what you do by taking your money out of the banking system, by investing in real assets, and by making preparations. You can have you can basically take the power away from them or reduce the power that they have over you. That's my message for today. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. I appreciate that very much. And last but not least, if you found this video informative, I know you'll find my book even more informative, and you can actually look through the book for yourself. If you go over to Amazon, they have a look inside feature, and you can go over there and flip through the book for yourself and see if you like it. Take care.